no longer believe in God. If he truly existed, why did he let my daughter die alone? If he loved me, why has my life been swallowed by so much darkness that I no longer wish to go on? I used to pray. I used to believe. But as the days passed, as wounds piled up, as my tears fell in vain, I realized I was only speaking to an endless void. And now, here I stand, in this cold, empty room, a rope in my hands. My name is Miriam Johnson, a Black woman in my 30s, born and raised in Canada. My entire life has been a struggle. Struggling to be a good mother, struggling to keep a job, struggling to believe that tomorrow would be better than today. But it seems that no matter how hard I tried, none of it ever mattered. Life was never easy for me. Being a Black woman in this society, I grew used to the stares, the whispered words, the doors that closed before I could even knock. They never said it outright, but I always knew. Some people looked at me as if I didn't belong. I learned to endure. I learned to pretend it didn't matter. But what I could never bear was seeing my daughter, Amara, go through the same thing. Amara was my entire world. She was the only light in my life, the only reason I kept going. She was brilliant, loved to draw, and had a smile that could brighten any room. But life was never kind to her. When Amara started school, things became unbearable. The other kids avoided her, mocked her, called her cruel names. The frizzy-haired girl, the dirty Black girl. You don't belong here. I did everything I could. I spoke to her teachers, the principal, even prayed every night, but no one really cared. They told me kids were just being kids, that Amara needed to toughen up. But they didn't understand. Some wounds don't bleed, yet they can still kill a person. That day, when I came home from work exhausted, I called her name, but there was no answer. My heart clenched. I ran upstairs, and that was when my world shattered. Amara was lying there, motionless, her face eerily peaceful. She had taken her own life. I held her, screaming until my voice broke. I begged God, but he did not answer. He was silent. From that day on, I stopped believing. All that was left was a hollow space inside me, a pain that nothing could fill. Tried to live for a while longer. But I knew I had already died the day Amara did. I was just a breathing corpse, drifting through a life that no longer had meaning. Tonight, I will end it all. I stand in the darkened room, the chair set beneath me. I grip the rope tightly in my hands. No more pain, no more tears, just an endless sleep. I close my eyes, ready to let go. But I don't know yet. This is not the end. This is only the beginning. The feeling of suffocation overwhelmed me. The rope tightened around my neck, cutting off my breath, leaving me struggling in vain. My chest burned as if an invisible hand was squeezing the life out of me, every cell in my body screaming for air. But it was useless. Pain, fear, panic. They consumed me entirely. And then, in an instant, everything stopped. The pain vanished. The struggle ceased. The desperate gasps for breath were no more. I opened my eyes. The first thing I saw was myself, my own body, hanging lifeless in the dimly lit room, hair cascading down, face pale, eyes closed. A strange sensation washed over me. I was looking at myself, but I was no longer that body. I felt weightless, untethered. I was floating, unbound by anything. And then, an unseen force pulled me into a vast darkness. This was not an empty, terrifying void. It was silent, peaceful. I didn't know where I was, but I didn't feel alone. And then, a light appeared. At first, it was just a speck in the distance, but it grew, expanding outward, radiating warmth. A sense of serenity wrapped around me, as though I had returned to a place I had long forgotten. A voice spoke, not in sound, but directly into my soul. My child. I froze. The voice was gentle, yet carried an undeniable authority. It was filled with compassion, but also a power beyond comprehension. I didn't need to see. I already knew. God. But instead of feeling peace, a surge of anger erupted within me. I clenched my fists. If I still had a physical body, I would have screamed, "You dare call me child? You dare speak as if you care about me?" My voice trembled. Whether from pain or rage, I didn't know. Where were you when my daughter died? Where were you when she cried alone, when she begged for kindness in a world that rejected her? Did you hear her cries? Did you know how much she suffered? The light before me did not waver. There was no reprimand, no excuses. God simply listened. His silence only fueled my fury. I believed in you. I prayed every single day. I taught my daughter to believe in you. And yet you let her die. You let her die in pain and loneliness. My voice broke. Why? That question had burned inside me since the moment Amara left. I didn't want comfort. I didn't want empty reassurances that everything happens for a reason. I wanted the truth. Still, silence surrounded me, but it was not a cold, distant silence. It was the silence of someone who was listening, someone who understood. Then, the light shimmered. A gentle breeze like an unseen hand brushed against me, soothing the fire in my heart. You are in pain. I know. The voice did not deny my suffering. It did not try to lessen it with meaningless words. It simply acknowledged it, letting me know I had not been abandoned, that my pain was not unseen, but I could not forgive so easily. If you knew, why didn't you do anything? A pause, and then God spoke once more. Come with me. Before I could react. The space around me shifted. The light enveloped me, pulling me forward. I didn't know where I was going, but I felt one thing deep in my soul. I was about to find my answer. The light enveloped me. I was no longer falling into an endless void. The sensation of floating disappeared, and instead, my feet touched something soft beneath me. I stood there, bewildered, as I took in my surroundings. A vast field stretched endlessly before me, bathed in a gentle glow, not like sunlight, yet filled with warmth. Tiny flowers shimmered like little lanterns, swaying lightly in an unseen breeze. There was no darkness, no pain, only an overwhelming sense of peace. And then, I saw her. A small figure stood in the middle of the glowing field, her back turned to me. The sight of her made my heart clench. Amara. Her name slipped from my lips, my voice breaking. She turned around. Those big, bright eyes, those soft curls, that sweet, familiar smile I thought I had lost forever. Amara looked at me, her expression lighting up as if no pain had ever touched her. Mom! The moment I heard her voice, my whole world collapsed. Amara ran toward me, throwing her arms around me. The embrace felt so real. I could feel the warmth of her tiny body, the faint rhythm of her heartbeat, the familiar scent that I thought had faded from my memory. I held her tightly, afraid that if I let go, she would disappear again. Tears streamed down my face. I buried my face in her curls, sobbing. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry, Amara. I couldn't protect you. I couldn't. But Amara shook her head, her small hands gently patting my back, comforting me as if I were the child who needed reassurance. "No, Mom, don't say that." I looked at her through my tears. "How can I not? You suffered so much, you were so alone. And I wasn't there to save you." Amara smiled softly, her eyes shimmering like the stars. "I never blamed you, Mom. I know you did everything you could." I choked on a sob. "But you died." Amara didn't flinch at my words. She just looked at me, her gaze filled with a peace I couldn't understand. "Mom, death isn't the end." I stared at her, the pain inside me still raw. "How can you say that when you're not with me anymore? When I lost you forever?" Amara gently took my hand and led me through the glowing field. "Mom, do you know, I used to be so afraid. When everything got worse, when I felt like I didn't belong anywhere, I thought dying would make it all stop. But after I left, I realized something." She stopped and looked into my eyes. I realized that nothing ever really ends. I felt frozen, in place. The pain we go through in life, it's all meant to help our souls grow. You and I, we don't just live once. We've met before, and we'll meet again. Everything that happens has a reason. I squeezed her small hand. "But what reason could ever justify what you went through?" Amara smiled, but this time, there was a trace of sadness in it. Because it was something I needed to experience. My heart shattered. "How can you say that? No one deserves to suffer like you did." "But if there's no darkness, how would we recognize the light? If there's no pain, how would we understand the meaning of love?" I didn't know how to answer. Amara sat down in the glowing flowers, patting the spot beside her, just like she used to when she wanted me to sit and tell her stories. I hesitated, then followed, feeling like I had stepped back into a time when she was still alive. "Mom, I know losing me hurt you, but your journey isn't over. You still have a purpose." I looked at her, my heart aching. "But I don't want to keep going, Amara. I don't want to live in a world without you." She took my hand again, squeezing it gently. "Mom, I'm always here. Even if you can't see me, I'm always with you." I broke down. "I miss you so much, Amara. I miss you more than I can bear." Amara wiped the tears from my cheeks, her voice as soft as the wind. "I know. But Mom, I've found peace, and I want you to find it too." I closed my eyes, trying to hold on to every second, every breath, every tiny moment of having her near me again. I didn't know how long I would be allowed to stay here. I didn't know if this moment would last or fade away like a dream. But right now, I just wanted to hold my daughter for as long as I could. Amara still sat beside me, her eyes shimmering like the stars. I wanted to hold on to this moment forever, but deep down I knew that wasn't possible. A gentle breeze passed through, carrying a strange sensation, not cold, but a shift, a change. A warm light radiated from behind me, and the moment I felt it, I knew. I turned around. The light was brilliant, yet it didn't blind me. It didn't bring fear. It only brought an overwhelming sense of peace. And then, a voice. "It is time for you to return." The voice resonated not just in my ears, but deep within my soul. I shook my head, clutching Amara tighter. "No, I can't leave. Please don't take me away from her again." I felt Amara squeeze my hand. Her voice was gentle. "Mom, you have to go." I turned to her, my heart breaking. "But I don't want to." Amara smiled, her eyes filled with an understanding far beyond her 11 years. "I know, Mom, but you have a path to follow." I looked back toward the light. But why? Why must I go back to a world full of pain? A world where I've lost everything? God did not scold me. He did not force me. Instead, he simply raised his hand. And in an instant, the world around me changed. I saw them. A homeless man curled up in the freezing cold, his eyes empty with loss. A young mother kneeling beside her child's hospital bed, desperately praying for a miracle. A girl standing on the edge of a bridge, tears streaming down her face as she struggled between life and death. A little boy huddled in the corner of a room, bullied and alone, with no one to turn to. One by one, the images appeared, faces full of pain, suffering, and hopelessness. Just like me. My chest tightened. Who are they? I whispered. God answered gently. They are souls who need you. They are the lost, the broken, just as you once were. I clenched my fists. But what can I do? I'm just a woman. I have no power. God looked at me, and I felt his love surround me, unconditional and boundless. You have love, and that is the greatest power of all. A wave of emotion surged through me. I looked again at those people, one by one. I saw their suffering, but this time, I also saw hope. A hand reaching out at the right moment could save a life. A kind word could pull someone back from the edge. A single act of compassion could change everything. I thought about myself, about the darkness I had drowned in. If someone had reached for me, would things have been different? If someone had helped me find the light, would I have chosen to end my life? I didn't know the answer, but I knew I wanted to be that person. I turned to Amara, and this time, her smile was no longer sad. I'm proud of you, Mom. My voice trembled. Aren't you afraid to stay here alone? Amara shook her head. I'm not alone. I'll always be here, watching over you. God stepped closer, his light enveloping me, dissolving my fears. Do you understand your purpose now? I took a deep breath. Yes, I understand. The light around me grew brighter. I felt my body becoming lighter, as if something was pulling me back. I looked at Amara one last time, memorizing every detail of her face, every glimmer in her eyes. She waved at me. Live well, Mom. And then, I fell. I gasped as I jolted awake. A sharp pain shot through my body, as if I had been violently thrown back into existence. My lungs burned as air forced its way in, making me cough uncontrollably. My throat ached, and when I reached up to touch my neck, I felt the deep grooves left by the rope. I was lying on the floor. The noose still dangled from the ceiling, but one end had come loose. I didn't know how or why it had snapped, but I was alive. I was alive. A sob escaped my lips, not from fear, not from pain, but from something deeper, a realization. Everything I had experienced was real. I had been there. I had seen God. I had seen Amara. The memories flooded back. The warmth of my daughter's embrace, the kindness in God's voice, and the faces of the suffering souls I had been shown. The ones I was meant to help. I sat there, shaking, overwhelmed by the weight of it all. I had once believed that death was my only escape, but now I understood. Life was what mattered. I was no longer the broken woman I had been yesterday. Had a purpose. It took time for me to recover, physically, emotionally, spiritually. In the first few days after my return, I barely left my home. I was terrified that if I spoke about what had happened, people would think I was crazy. But deep down, I knew one thing. I could not stay silent. So I started small. I returned to church, the place I had abandoned after Amara's death. The wooden pews, the stained glass windows, the soft echoes of hymns, they all felt foreign to me now. But I no longer carried anger in my heart. I knelt down, closed my eyes, and for the first time in years, I prayed. Not to demand answers, not to cry out in rage, but to give thanks. And then, I began to search for those who were like me, people who had lost everything, people drowning in darkness. I reached out to grief support groups for parents who had lost their children. I sat with mothers and fathers who carried an unbearable pain. I listened to their stories, and when I was ready, I shared mine. I joined organizations fighting against racial discrimination. I met children who were just like Amara, children who bore the weight of cruelty, of unkind words, of rejection. I held them close, whispered to them that they were worthy of love. I no longer looked away from suffering, because I had been there, and I knew they needed someone. Eventually, I started speaking about my experience. At first, only in small circles. Then, over time, I was invited to share my story at larger gatherings. The first time I stood before a crowd, my heart pounded, so hard I thought it might burst. But then, I remembered God's voice. I remembered Amara's eyes. And I told them about my journey. From the depths of despair to the light of realization. I spoke about meeting God, about Amara's message, about the boundless love I had been shown. Some were skeptical, some wept, but most importantly, they listened. Then one day, after a talk, a young woman approached me. Her hands trembled as she took mine, tears streaming down her face. "I was going to kill myself," she whispered, her voice shaking. "But after hearing you speak, I think I can try to live one more day." I held her hands tightly, and in that moment, I knew. My mission had begun. Every morning, I wake up with a different mindset. I no longer fear tomorrow. I no longer despair when I look back at the past. I live fully in the present. There are still difficult days, like an unexpected cold wind in the middle of spring. The pain of losing Amara will never completely disappear. But now, it is no longer an open wound. It is a sacred mark, a reminder of my purpose. I have learned to accept instead of running away. I have learned to forgive instead of holding on to hatred. And most importantly, I have learned to love, no matter how cruel the world can be. One late afternoon, I stood on a small hill near my home, where I could see the vast sky stretching endlessly. The sun was setting, painting the sky in brilliant shades of orange and purple. A gentle breeze brushed past me, making my hair sway. I looked up, and in that moment, I felt Amara's presence. Not with my eyes, but with my heart. She was watching over me. I smiled. No more tears, no more sorrow, only love, only peace. And I knew that even though she was no longer here in the way I wished, her soul would always be with me, like a guiding light. I don't know where the road ahead will take me, but I am no longer afraid. I know that I am not alone. I know that every person I meet, every story I share, every heart I touch, it all has meaning. I am no longer the woman who gave up on her life that day. I am someone who has walked out of the darkness, carrying the light I am meant to share. And if you are listening to this story, if you feel lost, hopeless, or without direction, please remember that you are not alone. There are things in this life we may never fully understand. There is pain that seems meaningless. But don't give up. Keep moving forward, because the light is always there. for those brave enough to seek it. Thank you for watching this video. If this story touched your heart, please like, share, and subscribe to the channel so you won't miss more meaningful stories. And if you have had a near-death experience or a spiritual story you'd like to share, don't hesitate to leave a comment or send me a message. You are not alone. We have each other.